How's it going, guys, and welcome back for another video. In this episode, me and a couple of lads set off to explore a bit of a new area. Now, none of us had dove here before, but I got a few marks off a good lino mate, and he said he'd done well here in the past, and with nice weather, we decided we'd head off for a bit of an exploration. Now, I had tried this spot last year, tried to have a bit of a look here, but we had really poor visibility, and I just didn't get the chance to dive where I wanted to dive. So, with this window, all the conditions were looking good, so we were super eager to get up there and explore the area. Now, as with a lot of new areas, we didn't do too well to start with. It did take us a while to find some ground, but eventually we found them and we got some really nice fish and managed to put together a really good esky. So tag along and I hope you enjoy it. Pulling up to this first spot here, it did look pretty good on the sounder. I could see it was a bit of a ledge and there was quite a bit of bait stacked up on there. We followed this ledge pretty much from one end right the way to the other, having a few dives along the way, and we saw a few of these Queensland groper and some undersized things, Maori cod, baby snapper, that sort of stuff, but there was nothing here worth shooting, so we moved on pretty quick. We had a fairly long stretch of area to explore, so we really didn't want to waste too much time on spots that weren't looking too promising. Now, the next few spots we went to, they were all pretty similar. We were finding good structure with a stack of bait, but there really wasn't that much fish. But we had a bunch more marks to look at that I got from my mate, so we kept on persisting. As we travelled up the coast, it was slowly starting to look a bit more promising. We were seeing a lot of life, but most of it wasn't legal size so far, although the viz was starting to improve a little with each few kilometres we'd travel. The guy who gave me a lot of these marks had told me that they used to get a fair few Spanish mackerel through here, so we decided to get some throw flashes and see if we could bring something in. Although a lot of these spots had decent structure and were stacked with bait, I really struggled to find any caves or any places fish can really hide. I can find this plays a huge role in holding those better fish, as if they've got nowhere to hide, they just won't stay there. By this stage, we had been diving for a number of hours and got maybe one fish between the three of us. And we were getting quite close to the end of the marks I was given, so we were really starting to think that this trip maybe just wasn't going to pay off. Until we came to this next spot. Now, on the sounder, it looked pretty similar, although I noticed that a lot of the bait was hugging the bottom, which is always a good sign of predators. And I also scanned up a few better arches in between that, so the boys lifted a little and we were pretty keen to jump in here. First dive here, and right away I could see this was a much more promising spot. There was a lot of broken up ground and good cracks and things in the rocks, which are always a good sign. And there was also this large cod floating around, and usually they won't hang on a spot unless there's pretty good structure there. I took a few dives here before I decided to pull the trigger, as I was seeing some fish that were worth taking home, but with the bait and the structure on this spot, I really thought there would be some better fish hanging around. After spending a little while looking around and not finding any real trophies, I decided it was time we just put a feed in the box, as we had travelled a fair way to get here. I sat on this rock for a little while to see what might come in, and after a while I decided I was going to take a nice Moses perch. By this stage, I was actually starting to get pretty frustrated. We had come a long way and I did have some high hopes for this trip, and it really wasn't what I was hoping for, but after missing that Moses, I was just floating along, reloading my gun, and I floated just off the structure that I was diving, and I noticed this big blue shadow move over a rock underneath me. As soon as I saw this guy, I knew that it was a big tusky. Now, I had a bit of a debt to settle with these fish, as a couple weeks prior, I was having a bit of a dive in my local area and I ran into a really nice fish. Now, I only had the little gun with me, but I thought I had the shot. I hit him a good spine shot, thought I stoned him, and as I've started swimming to the top, he just rolled straight off that spear. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to recover that fish. Now, on this time, I was not going to let that happen again. I had a pretty good shot, but I still took my time to get in nice and close and make sure I nail him, and I managed to pull off the stone shot. And this time, I got straight onto him before anything could go wrong. Little bluey. He might almost go 10, that fella. If you're close. Probably 9-ish. That guy was pretty much the first good fish to hit the esky, and with the slow day we've had, I figured it was only fair to go Bodie and let the other guys have a go. Now, they dove here for a little bit longer and they managed to pick up a couple of nice fish before we decided we'd head on and look for some fresh spots. Now, the next spot, it didn't have as much bait and it honestly didn't show that well on the sounder, but we figured we'd have a look anyway. And first dive, I was just breathing up, ready to have a drop, and I noticed that blue hue cruise over the rock again, and I managed to drop down onto another nice tusky. I put this guy super high, but luckily enough, there wasn't really any holes in this rock, so I was able to play him light and he couldn't really bury me into anything. When I got to the top here, my buddy had actually just speared a fish as well, so he was unable to help me with a backup shot. But after a bit of time, the fish started to run out of steam and I was able to play him up and get a good hold on him. Got him. Oh. After that fish, I went Bodie again for a little while, and the lads said they had started to see a few mackerel, but the sharks were not far behind them. They did stick it out for a bit, and eventually they managed to put one of those Spanish in the boat. And then we made the call, we'd move up not too far to the last marks that I was given, and we'd bust out the throw flashes and have a few drifts there. But by this stage, the current had pushed in a bit of silt and jellyfish, and the water was just not really that nice, but we had come a long way, so we persevered for the last couple hours. This area was a lot like most of the spots from earlier in the day, with quite a bit of barren rock, but it wasn't far from where we got those last fish, and there was still plenty of bait here, so we figured there had to be a few mackerel around. We were drifting along for a little bit before we saw much, but eventually a couple of Spanish mackerel came in to check the flasher out. After missing that fish, it wasn't too long before a few more rolled in, and I did actually manage to land one. But somehow I actually lost the original footage, and all I've got left is the short I made of that. So I'll roll that on anyway. Well, if you're still hanging around, cheers for watching, and I really hope you got something out of that one. Now, I've got a bunch of footage from late last year, early this year, even a bunch more current stuff, so I really hope to get a video out maybe every once a month or so, so stick around and hopefully I can catch you next time.